Would you please state your full name?
I'm Jeffrey Edward Epstein.
Have you ever been convicted of a crime?
Yes.
I'm Mark Epstein. I'm Jeffrey's. Yeah, I'm Mark Epstein. I'm Jeffrey's brother. As a matter of fact, he had a hearing coming up, for to appeal the bail decision. And that was coming, and it would have been the largest bail in the United States history. No one thinks he would have taken himself out. They both came out of the autopsy saying that they couldn't call it because it looked too much like a homicide. And interestingly enough, that never appears anywhere, even in the Justice Department report. On the initial death certificate we got, the cause of death said pending further study. But they won't investigate it, or have not yet investigated it as a homicide, because if they did, there was a lot of questions they should have been asking. They would have interviewed everybody else on the tier. Bill Barr came out early on and said that he saw that nobody went in or out of the tier. And that convinced them it was just. And now with this recent release of the video, you can see that you can't see the tier door. And people can get to that tier door without being caught on that camera. So what was he referring to? He should not have been moved until the medical examiner got there and investigated the crime scene. So by moving his body, they messed up the crime scene, to make it harder to see that it was actually a homicide. People who have investigated, nothing to do with me. These are not people who are working for me. These are independent investigators who are very, high tech with video stuff. I don't even know how to do that. When they looked at the metadata, which is the information buried in the video, they see that it was edited a number of times. So it just adds to the bull level. Let me put it that way. Nicholas Taglioni did rough him up when they were cellmates. He told his lawyer that if you picture somebody hanging, that ligature mark should be way up under his chin and go up behind his ears. It doesn't. Well, it's who are they protecting? Is the question. And it's whoever had Jeffrey killed. The question should no longer be, did Jeffrey Epstein commit suicide or was he killed? The question now should be, who had him killed? That's what they should be looking for.
Mark, thank you for coming on the podcast. And I can't imagine what you must have been through losing your brother. I've got a sister, and it's unimaginable to me to even comprehend something like that happening. So my condolences go out to you, first of all. And I know what you want to talk about specifically, what you think happened to him. But just to set the table for that a bit, are you okay to expand on what kind of mind frame he was in? What was his psychology before this happened? Because many people, there's theories out there that he was depressed and he was facing a big sentence, and these all these factors brought him down to do this to himself. I don't believe any of that. I think that's nonsense. What to you? First of all, can you introduce yourself to the viewers and then tell us what kind of a mind frame?
I'm Mark Epstein. I'm Jeffrey's. Yeah, I'm Mark Epstein. I'm Jeffrey's brother. As far as his mind frame, I didn't speak to Jeffrey while he was in jail. I spoke to him right before. His people he called. Nobody thought he was suicidal. Nobody thought this was going to happen. As a matter of fact, he had a hearing coming up, to appeal the bail decision, and that was coming, and it would have been the largest bail in the United States history. No one thinks he would have taken himself out before that bail decision, because if the bail was granted, then he'd be living in his house with an ankle monitor and armed guards and everything to make sure that he wasn't a flight risk. So why would he take himself out? I could see if they had the hearing and bail was denied and he didn't want to spend a year awaiting trial and then take yourself out, I would understand that. I mean, let me make it clear that when I first heard that he was dead from an apparent suicide, I had no reason to doubt that. I accepted it. I wasn't aware at that moment of the upcoming bail hearing. I didn't know when that was scheduled for. So, like I said, I just assumed he took himself out, and I respected that. But then the next day, they did the autopsy. I had to return to New York to identify his body, and they did the autopsy. And the two pathologists that were there for the autopsy, Dr. Roman, who was the city pathologist, and Dr. Bodden, who I had hired to monitor, to be a witness there, they both came out of the autopsy saying that they couldn't call it a because it looked too much like a homicide. And interestingly enough, that never appears anywhere, even in the Justice Department report. On the initial death certificate we got, the cause of death said pending further study. Doesn't say suicide. It said pending further. They wouldn't call it a because it looked too much like a homicide. And then a few days later, it's determined it was a suicide without any real explanation, other than when if they call it a suicide, that stops any investigation. Because if somebody commits suicide, there's not much to investigate. There's usually just two questions. One is, how did they do it? And the other one's why. Let's put the why aside for now. Right now, that wouldn't be important. But the how, when someone commits, it's pretty apparent when you find them how they committed suicide. They shot themselves, they jumped off a building, they poisoned themselves. End of story, end of investigation. This was never investigated as a potential homicide because they didn't want to. They wanted to keep the determination and push this under the carpet. Everyone believes Jeffrey was killed. Everyone who looks at all of the information that we have, nobody walks away saying that it was clearly a suicide.
I agree with you entirely. If you look at the stats for prisoners, it's usually if they get sentenced, they give up hope. If they've got this huge life sentence, then they're put automatically on the watch. That's the natural course of things. But when you're, pre-trial, you've got your hopes up that you're going to beat your case or you're going to get bail bonded out, that there's no motive at all to do something like this. It's insane.
Exactly. But they won't investigate it or have not yet investigated it as a homicide, because if they did, there was a lot of questions they should have been asking. They would have interviewed everybody else on the tier. Bill Barr came out early on and said that he saw that nobody went in or out of the tier, and that convinced him it was a suicide. And now with this recent release of the video, you can see that you can't see the tier door, and people can get to that tier door without being caught on that camera. So what was he referring to? Also, I've asked for the video footage from the camera he was referring to from 10 o'clock the night before until noon the next day, because I want to see what was happening when they took Jeff's body off the tier the next morning. Who was there? Who was calling the shots? Who said to move this dead body from his cell to the infirmary, which was against all protocol, because when they found Jeffrey, he was dead for at least 2 hours. There's no question about that. That's from the autopsy results. Probably longer, but minimum of 2 hours. He was clearly dead. He should not have been moved until the medical examiner got there and investigated the crime scene. So by moving his body, they messed up the crime scene, to make it harder to see that it was actually a homicide. There's lots of questions.
So when you see this video they've released then, where there's at least a minute, and some people are saying there's up to 7 minutes missing because the rest of the video has been sped up, does that just add to your suspicions?
Sure, of course. It's not the raw footage. It was put together from different video footages from that camera. People who have investigated, nothing to do with me. These are not people who are working for me. These are independent investigators who are very, high tech with video stuff. I don't even know how to do that. When they looked at the metadata, which is the information buried in the video, they see that it was edited a number of times. So it just adds to the bullshit level. Let me put it that way. And that's why. And you have the Justice Department who's in charge of this, pulling all this nonsense, not answering questions, not giving the footage that I was asking for. And you got to start asking, well, why are they doing that? Who's directing them? Who do they work for? Who's orchestrated this? And if Jeffrey was killed, who did it? Who had him killed? And that's what the questions they don't want looked at. The question should no longer be, did Jeffrey Epstein commit suicide or was he killed? The question now should be, who had him killed? That's what they should be looking for.
Absolutely. So, you said you went with what they told you in the beginning. You just accepted it at face value. What was the decision-making process then to bring your own medical examiner in? Baden, is it?
No, Dr. Barden, Michael Barden.
Baden.
Well, we have the right to, as a family, to have our own pathologist there at the autopsy. So just as a matter of caution, and because, it was, even though I accepted it, it was still a question, and it says like, it was still too much of a if. So it was just a precautionary step. I was expecting for the two forensic pathologists to come out of the autopsy and say, yeah, this looks like a suicide. And then, we could have dealt with the loss of my brother and his remains and then moved on. But when they came out saying that this was, they don't think it looks more like a homicide, well, that started the whole ball rolling. Now it's a whole completely different story. And one of the main reasons that they, like Dr. Barden has said many times, Jeffrey had 3 broken bones in his neck, which Dr. Barden's been dealing with prisons for over 50 years. He's done about 500 autopsies. He's been doing this for a long time. He says occasionally you might get a broken bone, possibly 2. He has never seen 3 broken bones in a suit hanging like that. And I saw a report that came out of the Philippines that another pathologist that I consulted with sent me, and it was actually a study of broken bones in the necks of victims. And they mentioned out of however many dozens of suicides they investigated, there was a certain percentage, excuse me, that had, I think it was like 20 some odd percent or 28% had 1 broken bone, a smaller percentage had 2 broken bones, and there was no case of 3 broken bones in this study from the Philippines. So that was a big red flag. And the way and where the bones were, it doesn't make sense that it was.
So when they're giving you this false narrative then that he did it to himself, did they give the specifics of how they said he did it? Did he lean in this direction? Did he use such and such a ligature?
Okay, well, for 4 years, almost 4 years, we were asking what position he was in when he was found. We couldn't get an answer to that. They wouldn't tell us. And then finally in the Justice Department report, which came out almost 4 years later, excuse me, they said he was in a seated position with his legs extended in front of him, and he was tied around the neck to the top bunk. And when they cut him down, his buttocks was an inch and a half off the ground. That's what the report says. So if you picture somebody sitting with their feet extended in front of them, but their buttocks is off the ground, the bulk of their weight is hanging by the neck. When you're sitting that way, Jeffrey's size, you have about 20 pounds of weight on your feet that's extended in front of you, but the bulk of your weight is hanging from the neck. And if you look at the ligature mark that was left on his neck from whatever was around his neck is in the center of his neck and sort of goes straight back. If you picture somebody hanging, that ligature mark should be way up under his chin and go up behind his ears. It doesn't. So the ligature mark doesn't match the description of how he was found. And then, when they have photographs when they were wheeling him out of the prison to take him to the hospital, and we've all seen this picture, he's intubated and they're squeezing an air balloon to try to put air into his lungs. The question is, why were they doing that to a person who's been dead for at least a couple of hours? But why the charade of trying to make it look like he was still alive or salvageable? And then there's a photograph I have of him in the hospital where he's dead on a gurney laying on his back, but he's wearing a hospital gown, the kind where you stick your arms through and it ties in the back. So who was there? Who was directing the show? Who said, dress this dead body in a hospital gown? Normally dead bodies are in body bags or covered by a sheet. Nobody's ever seen a dead body dressed in a hospital gown. So it's like they were trying to make it look like that he was killed. I believe he was killed, and they tried to make it look like a, and it turns out they did a very good job.
Did anything else stand out to you on the autopsy photos?
Well, he had other marks on his body that are not explained. He had a deep muscle injury on his left deltoid muscle, underneath that they found. How did that happen? And there's other marks, the little bruises on his back. There's also on his neck, above the ligature mark, there's an abrasion on the skin above that line. Now, if he was hanging, the way they say, and if that ligature, the ligature would slide up on his neck as he slid down into it. So if there's additional abrasion of the skin, the abrasion would appear under the ligature mark, because the ligature would ride up on his neck. But there's an abrasion above the ligature mark. So where did that come from? How did that get there? It's he wasn't hanging upside down. So you put all these things together, it's like, no, this is not a story. And the people that are calling it a story, Bill Barr, and then Dr. Sampson, who was the chief medical pathologist, who called it a story a few days later, without giving any explanation. They never saw the body. They were not at the autopsy. So you got to ask, Bill Barr's basing his decision that nobody went in or out of the tier. But you can't see that on the video they released. It's just the bullshit is just adding up, and the lies are circling around them.
Some breaking news right now. Disgraced financier Jeffrey Epstein has taken his own life while he was behind bars here in New York City. Epstein was facing trafficking charges. NBC News investigative correspondent Tom Winter now has the very latest. Tom, what more do we know?
Peter, what we know now is that at 6:39 this morning, the fire department and EMS here at New York City got a phone call from MCC, which is a federal detention facility here in Manhattan in New York City, where Jeffrey Epstein was being held awaiting trial. They took him to New York's downtown hospital. He was in cardiac arrest. And he was pronounced there. What we know from officials that have been briefed on what happened, he was found and appeared that he had hung himself in his cell or wherever he was being held within MCC, and he was found by prison officials this morning, and that's when they reached out and they called EMS in unsuccessful attempts to revive him. So that happened early this morning, and right now what we're trying to do is figure out if he was still on suicide watch, because there was an incident that occurred several weeks ago where he injured himself. It wasn't quite clear if that was an attempt on his life, an attempt to perhaps stage an attack. The details of that were never really kind of hashed out, if you will. So this morning there's some significant questions on how somebody who it was such a high-profile defendant, somebody who had connections that went up to a current president, could be found dead, and how this could have happened.
Yeah, Tom, you're exactly right. Again, for our audience just joining us right now, NBC News has now confirmed that financier Jeffrey Epstein has taken his own life at a jail here in New York City. We will, of course, be following the latest developments over the course of this day.
We're back right after this.
Do you think, let's play out the logical conclusion of this, do you think that myself, Bongino, and others would participate in hiding information about Epstein's grotesque activities? Or do you think we would also participate in not prosecuting people we had evidence to prosecute people on? But the problem is there's been like 15 years of people coming in and creating fictions about this that doesn't exist. Where's the videotape of an Epstein Island of X, Y, and Z committing these frauds? Why haven't you given it to us? Do you really think I wouldn't give that to you if it existed? I'm working my ass off, along with the leadership at the Bureau and DOJ, to get you what we're allowed to give you. And you're going to get the video of the cell. And you're going to see for yourself. And we will never be able to convince everyone.
Okay, let's get into that. So, what did you think before you got in office? Did you think that Epstein was murdered?
No.
No suspicion at all of it?
But I have a different background, right?
Right.
So, I was a public defender back in the day. I used to spend a lot of time in jails and a lot of time in segregated housing units, SHUs as we call them, right? And so, and I've known people that have committed suicide in these cells. And I know how you get in, how you get out, who works the system. And so the way, based on public information at the time, that he ended up the pictures and him hanging himself. I was like, man, that guy killed himself. There's just no way that you could have run an op and had people go into that cell and not have any video of it and not have any people come out and say, hey, yeah, I saw that guy. He shouldn't have been there, the guard or this guy. There's just no access points into places like this in the detention center he was in, which I've been in.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but what I was told, what I'd read, was that the guards were not paying attention or were sleeping.
Well,
right?
And in short order, you'll see it.
Is that correct?
Well, it's hard to surmise that from a video, right? Like, where they and look, do guards doze off on the night shift? Yeah. But no one can get in to the cell. And if they had gotten in to the cell, you would see it.
But we were told that the cameras were down.
Well, I don't know who said that.
But that was in the news.
We're giving you all the footage we have.
So why wasn't that released immediately? Why did this speculation escalate?
I think you'd have to ask whoever the Attorney General back then was, Bill Barr.
So before they released this video with the minutes missing, the official narrative for 5 or 6 years was that the cameras hadn't worked and the guards had fallen asleep simultaneously or were doing online shopping. And we looked at the history of that jail since it was opened in the 70s, and never had 2 guards fallen asleep simultaneously before. Did they say this crock of rubbish to you as well at the time?
Well, that was the party line. That's what they were telling everybody. Yeah. I mean, early on, I spoke to the Justice Department people at a meeting, and I kept asking questions, and all they kept saying was, after a thorough investigation, we determined it was a suicide. I'd ask another question. After a thorough investigation, we determined it was a suicide. It's sort of like when somebody pleads the fifth, over and over again, you get the same answer. Well, that's what I was getting from the Justice Department. And it's like, they wouldn't answer any question. Why not? I'm the next of kin. I should have access. There should be transparency to me on some of the questions I was asking. And they wouldn't say anything. It was just covering it up from day one, or day 2.
So, has anyone from the government been on your side on this?
Not openly. No one's stepped forward. Well, there have been people. I mean, supposedly Kash Patel and his assistant were saying that it was a hoax, that it wasn't a suicide. But now that they're part of the administration, now Kash Patel is saying it's a suicide. And I couldn't believe when he said, it's when you see one. I thought, how stupid is this guy? How many suicides has he seen? And what's he basing his expertise on? It's a joke. It's such a blatant cover-up. And again, he didn't see the body. He wasn't at the autopsy. He didn't see the crime scene. But he knows for sure, because he knows it's when he sees it. I couldn't believe he said that. And to think people are going to believe him.
They were all campaigning on the complete opposite theory, and now they've just suddenly done this about turn. What are they protecting, do you think?
Well, it's who are they protecting is the question. And it's whoever had Jeffrey killed. And you got, who do they work for? Who would they be protecting? Make a list in your head of who you think they would be protecting.
Well, there's all kinds of theories online, and there is a theory as well that his cellmate, that he had the cellmate before the cellmate was removed. I think it was Nicholas Tartaglione.
Yes.
Who was an ex-cop who'd murdered a bunch of people. There was a theory that Jeffrey had been assaulted by him, that he'd mentioned that to his lawyer, and some people suspect that was a failed attempt on his life. Is there any credence to any of that?
Well, the credence is that Nicholas Tartaglione did rough him up when they were cellmates. He told his lawyer that, and so that's true. Yeah, but I don't think Tartaglione was not in the jail cell with Jeffrey. And even look at it this way: let's assume, for the sake of this conversation, that Tartaglione killed him. Okay, why would the government cover it up and try to call it? There was a prisoner a few years ago, Whitey Bulger, who was a mobster who was on the lam for 20 some odd years, and they found him. He was put in jail, and he was brutally killed by 3 other inmates. Well, they investigated that, and they found the 3 guys and prosecuted them. There was no reason to cover it up or try to call it The three guys, they didn't try to make it look like a.
Yeah, what makes it really interesting is that both political parties seem to be in on the cover-up, and it doesn't look like you're ever going to get any justice. I mean, what do you do? Do you have to go through the court system to try and get more information released?
Well, that's what people are planning to do. Not just me. There's a lot of people now looking into this because these questions are being raised, and a lot of people are saying, "Hey, this apparently, well, obviously, wasn't a suicide," and they want to get to the root of it. Because look, it's an American citizen was killed in a federal prison, supposedly under the protection of the federal government, and that's what. No matter what party you're in, that should be a little bit disturbing.
Yeah, and it must have been absolutely devastating for you and your entire family. So, do you think the fact that this is all blown up in the news again now gives you hope that you can get to the bottom of things, or are you just seeing everybody scramble to cover it up?
Well, it's a little bit of both. We are seeing everybody, scrambling to cover it up with all, the nonsense videotapes and with all the errors and omissions and editing being done. The other stuff in the Justice Department report that doesn't add up. The Justice Department report said that I was notified after Jeffrey's death. I was not notified. I heard about Jeffrey's death on CNN. The government didn't notify me.
So what were you doing the day you found that news out?
I was having breakfast. I was out of town in a hotel having breakfast, and the television was on, and it said, I saw his picture, and it said Jeffrey Epstein was found dead from an apparent suicide. So that's when I said, "Oh, gee, well, that's when I first thought, okay, he decided to take himself out." At that moment, I had no reason to doubt it. But like I said, after the autopsy was done, I had a lot of reason to doubt it because the pathologist doubted it highly. Yeah.
And prior to that, what had been your last communication with him?
Well, the night before he flew home when he got arrested, he got arrested on a Friday, and he was in Paris before he flew home from Paris. So Thursday night, before he came home, he called me from Paris, and it was just a normal conversation. We used to speak or email each other, kind of regularly.
So his last communication, he was in good spirits. He wasn't depressed.
Oh yeah,
or
absolutely,
anything.
Absolutely. Yeah. When we used to speak, we used to make each other laugh quite a bit. So it was one of those funny phone conversations. Very normal.
So speaking of France then, Jean-Luc Brunel was arrested, and he ended up, the same fate as Jeffrey. Do you find that highly suspicious in the French prison?
Well, I find it suspicious for sure. I mean, I don't know Brunel. I didn't have any dealings with him, but yeah, it's obviously suspicious.
And do you think that something could possibly happen to Ghislaine Maxwell? Because it seems to be a reoccurring thing surrounding this case.
Anything's possible.
And do you think that she perhaps knows a lot more and could help get to the bottom of what happened with your brother?
Possibly, yeah. I think it's a possibility.
Do you think any of that will come out? Because it seems like she's playing to try and get her sentence reduced. And she's supposed to go before Congress on the 11th of August.
Yeah, and she's, from what I understand, she's looking to make a deal. Like, she'll talk, but she wants immunity and certain other conditions. I don't know the list, but she has certain conditions before she talks. Or otherwise, she's going to go in and plead the fifth to everything, I would imagine.
So
it also depends. Like, we know that the guy who went to speak to her. Unless we know what questions he actually asked her, it doesn't really matter. He could have went in and said, ask her what her favorite color is, and then came out saying, well, we got no useful information. So we don't know what he asked her, and that would be very telling.
Well, the guy who went to speak to her was Trump's number 2 at the DOJ, I believe. He was Trump's former criminal defense lawyer.
Yeah, that's another coincidence for you.
Seems really odd. And Ghislaine Maxwell's lawyer is friends with Trump's lawyer. They were on a podcast, all lovey-dovey, buddy together. So it just gets weirder and weirder, Mark.
Yeah, well, it's been weird for almost 6 years now.
And as you've seen it just swirl around the internet and all these theories come and go, What's crossed your mind? And are there any theories that you would like to set the record straight on through this broadcast?
I don't listen to a lot of the theories that are out there. I'm just looking at the facts. If someone has a theory that's based on facts, I'll listen to them. But people just have, ideas. Look, there's things out there I've recently read a couple of articles or ideas where I've been described as Jeffrey's older brother. Well, I'm not the older brother. Jeffrey was older than I was. So, if they can't get that simple fact straight, I can't put any weight into what they're doing.
And, do you have other family members that were close to Jeffrey, and has it impacted them?
No, we have no other siblings, and Jeffrey had no children. He was single. Our parents are gone, so there's not a lot of family. I was his only, next of kin.
I think the biggest theories are like the Clintons and Prince Andrew and things like that. Do you think that's nonsense, or do you think they are so powerful they could have like an intelligence agency go into the prison and do something like this to Jeffrey?
I don't think so, because if they did, then why would the Justice Department be covering this up? Have this orchestrated and covered up? And I don't think any of the names you mentioned have that ability.
So who will be at the top of your list then?
I'm not speculating. I stick to facts.
Okay. Yeah, don't blame you. And have you got any pending legal action?
Well, supposedly the groups that I've been in contact with may be filing some more FOIA requests for more information, and maybe some lawsuits to get the previous ones filled.
And has the government told you about the missing minute?
And there's other groups that are investigating it for. No, they don't. The government doesn't tell me anything. I'm the last person they want to talk to at this point.
What was the last communication you had with the government?
After a thorough investigation, we've determined this was no, that wasn't the last. The last was when I asked for the videotape from the camera that Bill Barr referred to, years ago. I asked for that early on. I was initially told I couldn't get it because it was part of an ongoing investigation. And I understand that. But then after the investigation was over, I asked again for that video footage. And I was very specific that I wanted to see the footage from the camera that Bill Barr was referring to. But I wanted to see the footage from the camera from 10 o'clock at night until into the next morning to see who were the last people on the tier and what happened when they took Jeff's body off the tier. And then I was told, I got a response from the Bureau of Prisons that the two cameras that were working don't show that area. And that's the last area. So first, I couldn't get the footage because it was under an investigation. And then the cameras that were working don't show that area. So again, what was Bill Barr referring to? What video was Bill Barr referring to? And now they released this video that doesn't really show anything.
And the official narrative at the time was that Jeffrey had been put on watch and that his cellmate had been removed the night before. Is that correct?
Well, I don't know. Well, he was put on watch initially after that incident with Taglione, but then he was removed from watch.
Okay, I see. Was he in a single cell the day this happened then?
Yes. Yeah.
I see. Okay, and was there any recorded phone calls that you could access that perhaps Jeffrey made that would indicate his what was going on in the jail at that time?
Not that I know of. No, he made a phone call the night before, but that wasn't recorded. He made a call from the shower. Somebody gave him a phone to use in the shower, and he said that he was calling his mother, but our mother passed away in 2004. So it's well known that he called his girlfriend that night.
So his last phone call was to his girlfriend on a contraband phone from the prison shower. And did the girlfriend say that he was in good spirits?
Yes.
So she must be as shell-shocked as you over this.
Well, we were all kind of shocked, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And what about written correspondence from him in his final days? Did you get to access any of that?
No.
And when was his last legal visit before he died?
It might have been that day. I think it was with
That day.
Yeah, because he had people, lawyers with them a lot over there. So I know for a while, I don't know if it was that day, likely was, he had paid to have lawyers there so that he wouldn't have to be in the cell, so he could be with somebody in the area where the attorneys meet with prisoners. And supposedly other prisoners were a little annoyed because he was taking up one of those lawyer rooms because he was just paid to have somebody there with him.
Yeah, that makes sense. And didn't his lawyer at the time say that Jeffrey was exploring various legal options and he was hopeful that they would work? Hence, he didn't have any motive to do this?
Yes, that's what the lawyer said.
I think, did you go on Piers Morgan as well, Mark?
Yes, I did.
Have you thought about going on Joe Rogan and Tucker Carlson? Because I think they would get huge, you get a huge wave of support and people.
I was on Tucker Carlson a while back. He contacted me. That was probably a year or two ago. But more recently, I've been with other people who have asked to hear me speak about this, like you have.
Yeah, I think if you went on Rogan or Tucker again, I think you cause a huge amount of outrage in the public, and it would probably help your cause if you would consider that.
Well, I know that Joe Rogan is now taking an interest in this because he mentioned about that drawing a line in the sand that's been crossed. So he was questioning it just a few days ago.
I watched the clip. I think he said, I don't know if it was him or his guest, said that even if Jeffrey had leapt into the rope, you wouldn't have had the 3 hyoid fractures or breakages like they're trying to tell us.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was one of the major clues for the pathologist that actually did the autopsy, that actually saw his body, not the ones who just want to call it brush this off and to stop any further investigating.
Mark, we're at the 30 minutes, and I appreciate you spending this time with us. Is there anything you'd like to say in conclusion to the public about this while it's so important and in the news?
Well, I think the main thing is that to be pretty much convinced that this was not a, and the question should be asked, who had Jeffrey killed? That's the real question. Who had Jeffrey killed?